recording. Thanks for joining today. Yes, Hayden McCall, and I've got with me Nigel and James. Let me just flick this screen over so you can see what I'm seeing. There's Hayden McCall, look at that, a nice picture. My video probably may not line up with that. That shot was taken a few years ago. So just while people are joining, just wanted to say that today, well, obviously simplifying B2B sales and the buyer's journey, making sure you are in the right session from quote to cash. Bit of housekeeping, there will be a recording as I've now fired off. That'll get sent out to you via a link on email tomorrow, so no need to worry about note keeping or anything. Very keen to hear questions from the floor, so just in the on your Zoom panel, it's a Q&A, just jump in there and fire questions as you like to, and I'll pose those to the presenters as we go through. We'll be wrapped up within the hour, a couple of presentations to get through, so we will get on with those. Presenters today, James Hole from Simon Kutcher Partners. He's based in Sydney, and he's Senior Director, and they are focused on global pricing strategy in business consulting. And Nigel Greaves, who I've just learned is an analytical chemist, also runs sales and operations at medical instruments supplier Shimadzu. G'day, guys.
Hi, Hayden.
G'day.
Okay, so we'll kick off with James. James, I see you've also got yourself an MBA from Stanford on top of geological science and civil engineering degrees from the University of Sydney. It sounds like it might have been headed towards a mining career as opposed to a career in management consulting. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Hayden, it actually did start out in mining engineering. I think I spent 3.5 years underground or close to underground early in my career, but after a little bit too long spent knee deep in mud, I decided that other things would be a little bit more interesting and perhaps a bit more comfortable. So, hence consulting.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, well, James, why don't you just share your screen there, and we'll run through your presentation and take from there.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. Now, hopefully people can see that.
Yep, that looks good.
So I think I've got about 20 minutes to share my take from the perspective of an independent external consultant working with a lot of B2B companies on the quote to cash process. So I've got about 10 slides here I want to share, and please, as questions come through, Hayden, please pass them through to me as you see fit. So let's see if I can get there we go. A little bit on myself. Look, I think we've sort of more or less covered it, but I've spent about 15 years in this space, working for a range of companies from very large multinationals through to very small startups. My role is essentially a strategist, but with a focus completely on the revenue side of businesses. We at Simon Kutcher don't spend time worrying about operations improvement. We're very much focused on the sales team and how to get more out of the top line of a business. So that's about increasing revenue and/or that's about increasing profitability and margin performance. 2 seconds on Simon Kutcher. We're a global consulting house, originally a university spin-off out of Europe, actually. 32 years later, we're 1,000 consultants spread around the world across 34 offices. We are structured in practice areas as well as geographic areas. So we have an overlay matrix structure so that we have a fair bit of depth across pricing, marketing, sales optimization, across most industry verticals. The bottom right-hand corner graphic very quickly talks about our strengths, which is the strategy, marketing, pricing, and sales. But above that is digitalisation, and that's an increasing focus of our business because it's an increasing focus of our clients' business, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about. Underneath that sits transformation. We as a company, and it's true for the vast majority of our client base, is actually about making change in business and improving business. So it's those two themes I think we're going to pick up on a little bit today. Moving on, digitalisation is really changing the way we do business, our clients do business. It's a bit of a buzzword, and so I want to stay away from the jargon and really describe what it means from the front of a business. And by that I mean the revenue side of the business. Digitalization's of course been going on for a long time in the back end of the business. Of course, there's also been brochureware websites and things like that companies have used for a long time to build awareness. But that's not really what we consider proper digitalization. When we think of digitalization as it relates to the revenue side of the business, we're talking about digital strategy. So that's how are we using digital techniques, how are we supporting digital brands, how are we going to market with a digital platform that's going to support our customers and ultimately ourselves. Digital business model, so that's about finding new and innovative ways to reach out to customers and work with customers, tapping into new revenue streams, designing a better portfolio or a more appropriate portfolio for modern business, and then digital pricing models that support that change in business focus. And then, of course, there's the customer journey. And the customer journey is really important because ultimately we want to make it easy for our clients to work with their customers, because ultimately a happy client is one that's going to be promoting you and ultimately going to come back. So,
James, just sort of thinking while you were talking there, but as you say, buzzwords and good old IT and Gartner-led vernacular that goes on in this industry. But digital transformation's a big noise, and I think everyone kind of would be realistic in that it's now a business conversation as opposed to an IT conversation. But how far do you think we're down that pathway in terms of digital transformation and digitization of customer engagement?
Look, it's a great question, and the answer is variable. There's no single answer to it. It's for companies that have been born into a digital era and digital age. It's usually we find they're a long way down that journey. Let's take Amazon for an example. They're built around a digital platform. Equally, many companies were founded and their heritage is pre-digitalization. And for them, that migration, that transition to modern business practices is quite hard, partly because they've got to walk away from legacy, partly because of inertia, partly because they don't understand, they haven't got the capabilities to be a digital company, to have a digital platform. So look, it is a very variable answer to that, Hayden. What I think most companies realize, though, as well, as they're a bit behind, and that's often why they'll come to people like ourselves. The good news story is you don't need to be best practice straight away. You can progressively make comfortable steps and get there. And that's what the smart companies are doing. They're not throwing away their old practices, but they are progressively migrating to a new platform.
And I guess we'll talk more about it, I'm sure, but the B2B model is probably slightly lagging behind B2C, but seeing and expectations being set in the marketplace around B2C models. B2B's left with complexity, and Nigel, I'm sure you'll be talking a bit more about that later, that customer expectations here, but ability and complexity to reach that is a bit of a gap that we're in the middle of filling, and hopefully today's about helping that process. Right.
Yeah, look, that's spot on. The B2C is easier often because by the very nature of the products, they're simpler. There are some examples, counter examples like cars and things like that. And there's a lot of science in how do you make the B2C offer with something as complex as the auto industry more digestible for a consumer base. But look, by and large, that's about simplifying the offer. Whereas in the B2B space, we actually embrace the complexity and use tools to embrace the complexity. And we'll certainly touch on that in a little bit more detail in a second. So I guess the last highlight on this page was really, if we're focused on the digital strategy, business model, and customer journey, we need capabilities in organizations. And the smart players that we're working with are building that in-house, but also using support teams in a very strategic way to help them get up the learning curve quickly. And the obvious question there that people listening should ask when they're thinking about people to work with is, how do we manage that knowledge transfer? How do we upskill the organization? If we try and learn it all in-house, that's going to be too slow. But equally, at the end of the day, we do want it resident, most of this skill set resident in our business. So a good question to be asking of your consultants and of your service providers is, how do you help us get up to speed? Moving on to slide 5, what we've got here is a Simon Kutcher framework around commercial excellence. There are 5 parts to it: pricing strategy, price setting, methodologies, price execution, and then under that is mindset and capabilities, and then process and organization. What I want to do here is focus very much on the price setting and the price execution, although it does feed heavily into the mindset and capabilities, because in many ways the tools we're going to talk about here are to support the confidence and the capabilities by taking process and taking complexity and simplifying it to support a sales team. So I won't go through that in a lot of detail, but just so that the audience does understand that there's a lot more to this in terms of how do you structure this thinking when you do apply these sort of techniques to your business. Very quickly, where does complexity come from? And, you know, as the variety of people on the call will appreciate, there's no simple answer to that. Complexity comes from a lot of different places. In most traditional businesses, it's people are scared of complexity. I guess the point that I would try and tease out here is complexity should be a good thing. If you embrace it and your competitors can't, it's a point of differentiation, and that's pretty valuable. Typical symptoms when we don't have the tools to embrace complexity properly are things like sales team making excuses that mixes explaining the problems. So if margins are down, oh, it was because of the mix. Oh, that was kind of great when we didn't have modern data tools and didn't have good systems. You know, that excuse is going away, and it should go away. Other examples are failing to cross-sell or upsell, businesses that are focused on volume rather than margin, confused or disgruntled customers. That's a really important one. If the offer's not simple for the customer to get around, and I mean product as well as service, then you're going to undermine your capacity to differentiate to your competitor against your competitors for your customers. Time wasting and failure to prioritize from the sales team, and so on. There's a long list, and there's no one answer. But if they're the sort of things that your business is grappling with, then chances are you don't have the tools in place to properly support your sales team.
Yeah, those customer objections that very quickly become the unsuccessful salesperson's objections with the tools and products and pricing and complexity that they've been given to sell. It happens quite quickly, and I guess that goes back to your mindset and some of those cultural settings of how you get through the stuff.
Look, that's absolutely right. And it's many companies or many smaller or medium-sized companies, the SMEs will look at the big companies and go, well, they've got it right. And I can tell you they don't. You know, of course, some of them do, but by no means is this a challenge that's focused on the SME world. In fact, in many cases, the SME world can embrace digitalisation faster than the older, slower-moving multinationals, because the change is that much easier, particularly cultural change as well as technology change. So yeah, it's a challenge for all. How to empower the sales team, and what people will hopefully be seeing on their screens at the moment is a simple graphic at the top and then a little bit of detail below it. Business is all about people. Effective business is all around harnessing people's energy, passion, focus, ability. When in a complex environment, that needs support. And so that's where we would add process and structure, which is very much what Simon Kutcher and others do, overlaid with technology to make that process repeatable and easily deployable throughout the business. And that ultimately can lead to best practice. So it's a simple schematic. People will have seen it a bunch of times before, but it's to remind everyone that people are great, business is about people, but you need process and structure, and you really need that embedded into proper technology solutions to be deployable in a scalable, manageable, sustainable way. A quick digression, I'm working with a very large multinational at the moment, market capital around 10 billion Australian dollars. And we've got the people piece right, and we've got the structure piece right, and we're really struggling with the technology piece. It's actually a good news story because it's going to embed change in this company very effectively. But again, it's a journey of kind of 12 months to 36 months to get it right and deploy it very effectively. So that's where people should be thinking about their technology partners very early as they embark on this change. It's not necessary to have them there the whole time, but if that's an option, I certainly encourage it. You know, keep your technology solutions front of mind as you're embarking on these changes within your organisation.
I'm going to take the opportunity to have a little gripe here, because sometimes I think the reverse applies, where these large financial institutions and there's one that I'll name because it's PayPal, and they're causing me major headaches at the moment. But I think the issue is really they've employed people who can't keep up or think about what the technology is telling them they need to do. I happen to be an exception, a New Zealand-based director of an Australian company needing to prove who I am in my residential address, and I can't comply with the address requirements that they've got. So I've been in this nightmare of a circle, and it just seems to be that sometimes it doesn't start with people. Sometimes the big companies particularly will think that they've got the technology platform in place, and they'll put monkeys on top of it, and it results in a very frustrating customer experience, I can tell you.
Interesting. Look, it's not often I find myself repeating what I guess is something of a cliche, that data should become information, which should become insight, which should become judgment. So ultimately, it's all about good judgment. How you get that, I guess different businesses have different solutions. But at the end of the day, it has to be about good judgment. This is all about supporting human beings making better decisions. If you put a monkey on the top of a Ferrari, it's still going to crash.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Good. So, look, I think, people have, as we've chatted, perhaps have had an opportunity to read some of the examples of sales team enablers, but, deeper understanding of customer insight, guided configuration and quote process, and we're going to come back to that in a second. Consistent pricing outcomes, and that's a really important one, so that you can adhere to value pricing principles. It's certainly a barrier that we at Simon Kutcher spend a lot of time talking about, value pricing as opposed to cost plus pricing, understanding the value that you deliver. Faster quote turnaround, simplified quote turnaround, simplified authorization. There are a bunch of things that the right technology platform are going to do to support your business. So, circling back to some of the things that the right tools can very specifically do. What we've got here on the left-hand side is an attempt by me to show what configuration looks like. So you've got a car, in this case, it's a very fancy Mercedes-Benz that is probably about 500,000 parts that comes down into one car. It's meant to be an illustration here that with the right tools, you can configure something very complex into something very manageable. The auto industry is actually a great example because it is such a complex product, and ultimately the science of decision making has led to quite a clever process now of how you bundle and how you support people through the decision making process. There are two parts to that. There's supporting the sales team in guiding their customers, but there's also the consumer themselves. So there's a lot that can be done in the configure part of a tool to make the decision-making process much easier. Very quick anecdote. There's a fascinating study on jams. They put two sets of jams in a supermarket. One had 36 options, one had 6 options. The 36 option got everyone's attention, but people didn't purchase because it was too confusing. The 6 jam option got less people's attention, but when they did get their attention, they were much more likely to make a purchasing decision. So this is how the configure piece can work. If you configure a system properly, you can support the sales team and ultimately support the consumer making a decision that's right for them.
Yeah, there must be some pretty soon. I mean, the car manufacturer is a good example because there must be some very sophisticated, or maybe not experimental, whatever the word might be, but just finding where customers perceive value, what they're prepared, what their expectation is going to be included in the package versus what they'd like to say yes or no to. I guess they've had a good few years to work that out, but it's constantly evolving as standards raise. More and more features get included, and it gets to the point where there's so many damn features that you kind of start to have more than you really actually use and need.
It becomes paralysis by data dump. That's right. And look, the other layer of complexity in there that a good system can support is understanding the different customer bases, because of course it's not a one size fits all. Different consumers have different value perceptions, different willingness to pay. So understanding the customer base and having the tools to support the customer understand the different the sales team understand the different customer bases is really important as well.
So James, just as it's not large on the screen, or my screen anyway, just maybe talk us through the chart you've got on the right there, because that seems to be quite a generic model, but phases of the pricing strategy process?
Yeah, look, it is a generic model, but it hopefully highlights four key things, and it is around pricing. The four lenses that a system needs to look at to be very effective are understanding the product itself in all of its complexity, understanding the consumer and understanding the consumer segmentation. And that's all really about getting your marketing right, understanding your markets very effectively. The third piece is understanding the circumstance of the sale. So if someone needs something urgently, if they're going to need it, in 6 months' time, is it a project sale? Is it an impulse buy? All of those things can be understood to better price a product. And the last piece, and this is a product example because of Nigel's input and what we're going to be talking about in a second, but then there's service on the back of products. And a lot of companies fail to understand that. So three core lenses plus service, which is understanding the product, understanding the customer, understanding the circumstance, understanding the ongoing or incremental service, all of which adds to complexity that sales teams get intuitively, but don't get in a repeatable way. And the individual mightn't be able to do it in a repeated way. Certainly the organization won't be able to do it in a repeatable way unless they've got the tool and the process to guide them through it in the same way. So again, it's not about taking away judgment. It's about giving people a framework to apply judgment in a very specific, targeted, effective way. It also, and I guess sort of this is banging our drum a little bit, which is sort of fundamental to our thinking, is it supports value pricing. Not cost plus pricing, not what the market will bear pricing. It's all about what's the value we're delivering to the customer and sharing that fairly with the customer.
So you would see a pricing strategy process would go through each of these phases, and obviously there's some analytics required, some probably some customer focus group type inputs, and in terms of your supply demand curves and where you are on them. Is there tool sets that sit within each of these phases that you particularly kind of focus on? Is that how it works?
Yeah,
or?
so our role in the process with our clients is to design that process. So there are a lot of frameworks, there are a lot of templates we use, but every business is a little bit different, and we draw the compromise between technical sophistication and implementability. What's actually going to work in a business? What's the sales team going to embrace and be willing to work with? So that's what we would do, and through it we work in partner with a technology solution provider to take this architecture, this pricing architecture, and then embed it into a technology solution. And all the good technology solution vendors are capable of doing this and capable of crossing that last mile, which is getting it to the sales team when they need it in a format they need. And that's often the hardest piece, is getting it to the sales team in a timely way. There's no good in this sitting in an ERP system back in the office. You need to get this out to the sales team when they need the guidance for their decisions, for their judgment.
Yeah, right. We've all been there as producing the sales proposal that hits the conversation that you've just had with a prospect, the build up and their understanding, from their perspective, the expectations, the options that are on the table, how are you going to address it in order to get a sale. You've really got to, that proposal creation. It's complexity, but you want to get there faster. You want to be timely. There's a lot of things do come to. There's a challenging point in time where you've got to make some decisions and hope that you've got it right. So I guess when you've got a bit of science behind it.
Well, that's when you've got a good sales team as well. You do trust their judgment. So that's right.
Yeah.
So look, once you've got the tools in place, they can also be used to monitor very effectively. And data can be a very powerful way of understanding what's going on. Not Big Brother. This is about the sales team in many ways learning from themselves, learning from each other, by using monitoring, by using tools to identify best practice. You can continue that ongoing improvement process, that incremental improvement process very effectively. Of course, there's KPI traction. Of course, there's understanding how price rise is working. Of course, there's promotional performance effectiveness measurements and so on. But first and foremost, good monitoring can be a self-perpetual learning process, which is a great lead then into guidance. So this is a good tool will then, from what it's seeing, guide to best practice. And that, again, is not a Big Brother setup. It's just enshrining institutional learning rather than individual learning. One of the challenges we'll often encounter in businesses is you have some very good individuals, but sharing their learnings through the organization and scaling that learning is very hard. And so again, with good tools, good monitoring, good process in the beginning, we can then use that to guide the whole organization to be towards best practice.
Where do you see the key, well, who are the key roles that are involved in this, from end to end, I suppose? Not all organisations have product managers, but product managers obviously have a significant role to play in pricing and the cost plus value kind of matrix. But then sales management, sales, and Nigel, into your role, sales through into operations and delivery. Is it a team that can come together across those different disciplines, or is there one role that kind of has responsibility in this space? It's fundamental in terms of business operation, I suppose. So I'm kind of talking in generalistic terms, but what's your view, James, in terms of important roles that you see that you should be investing in that capability?
Yeah, let me have a quick crack at that one. But I think Nigel will probably have some good insights, having gone through the process fairly recently. Look, my view is any modern business should have a product or service management team. It's there to support the sales team. There's a lot of upside opportunity in properly understanding the value that you're delivering your customer, and you only do that by having people that are dedicated on it. So it's increasingly common that we do have some form of product management. It doesn't need to be a huge team, but a couple of people is pretty important. If you don't have that in place, 9 out of 10 times you find people slipping into this cost plus mindset that, well, we don't have the smarts that sit between buying and selling. So what we're going to do is take whatever we bought it at and charge a little bit more. And unfortunately, that leaves a lot of opportunity on the table. So most companies I work with, when we run the numbers on them and on their business and show them what they can do, it's very quickly self-sustaining to have a couple of people that are doing that product role. Their skill set tends to bridge between the ops and the sales team. So they need analytics. They need to understand the market. They often become future leaders in the business.
I was going to say, quite a senior role. It's not a kind of a marketing on the side. It's very much central to has that oversight from one end to the other.
We've got it. And Nigel, I'll jump in, and then I'm very keen to hear what you say. We at Simon Kutcher have done a couple of studies on the role of senior leadership in pricing effectiveness, and our research says that when the C-suite is involved in pricing, actively involved in pricing of their product, their EBIT margins are 25% higher than the rest. It's a very stark contrast when they're involved and when they're engaged versus when they're not. Nigel, sorry, I spoke over the top of you.
That's fine, James. I just from my point of view, we also do get our marketing manager involved in pricing or setting pricing. He has a very good understanding of the market itself, and also a very good understanding of the sort of pricing that the market will accept. So we have a matrix. So it'd be myself, our marketing manager, and our product managers getting involved in pricing.
That, for us, that's a great structure. The more hands in the pie, without diluting ownership, someone needs to own it, but the more hands in the pie contributing, the better. It's really important. So look, a couple of highlights maybe to finish up. So first one is digital capability is increasingly essential ingredient in successful B2B enterprises, especially where there's complexity involved. Faster, more accurate proposals or quotes are going to deliver positive customer experiences. The better the customer experience, the better supporters and advocates they're going to be for your business. Third point, sales teams empowered with easy to access product data and pricing information will sell more, and they'll sell more at a better margin. So increasing profitability. 4, technology tools such as CPQ, configure, price, quote, can automate sales processes and operations to help you achieve your business's goals and ultimately lead to greater profit and greater growth. Look, and finally, and this is an important one to remember, you don't have to do it all at once. Much of this can be staggered. So it's in my experience, it's much better to do this in a very strategic, very deliberate, sequential series of events, as opposed to the big bang solution where things can go wrong. And if they do go wrong, there's often quite a lot at stake. So you don't have to do it all at once. A series of well-planned steps to progressively build capability enables the sales function is a sensible course of action.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, James. And just a reminder from the audience, I know we're talking in general terms necessarily. We've got multiple industries represented in the audience, but from your specific perspective, your opportunity is to get some answers on issues and pain points that you're dealing with. So do that by getting questions in. You've got these guys at your disposal to answer your specifics. So by all means, just click on, open up the little slide up bar, Q&A type away, and I'll put those questions to the presenters. We'll have time at the end. But at this stage, we'll hand over to you, Nigel. I mean, obviously, you've been doing a fair bit of what James has been talking about within Shimadzu. Your role as sales and operations manager is a little bit unique, so we're keen to hear more about just that natural friction. And yeah, go ahead and share your screen. Yep, good stuff. Yeah, hand over to you, Nigel, and to talk us through it.
Yeah, thanks, Hayden. And James, it's really interesting your presentation because this is the process that Shimadzu is going through at the moment. We actually implemented CRM probably 7 years ago, but we've only just implemented our CPQ just recently. So, and it has been a slow process, but we're getting there, that's for sure. But just to follow on from what Hayden said earlier, I'm the National Sales and Operations Manager for Shimadzu in Australia and New Zealand. A bit of background on the company itself. Shimadzu is one of the oldest instrument companies in the world. We started up in 1875, a very well-established company. We manufacture scientific instruments, medical X-ray imaging equipment, and industrial equipment, things like aircraft components for companies such as Boeing. They're quite a diverse and broad range of products that we have.
So the manufacturing base up in Japan, is it, Nigel?
Yeah, well, look, we manufacture in Japan, but we also manufacture in the US and some other sites around the world as well, including China now and the Philippines. Very big manufacturing facility in the US as well. So, our headquarters is in Kyoto in Japan, and we have in Australia and New Zealand, we have just over 100 staff. The sort of markets we cover are hospitals, research facilities, and universities. Okay. So some of the challenges that have faced our company. So over the last 10 years, we've been growing consistently. We've been getting year-on-year growth of 15 to 20%, which is quite interesting in a market that's actually flat or shrinking. We've been facing a number of challenges in this in our sales area. A lot of those challenges have been to do with our current processes and the tools that we use as part of the sales process. They're very dated. In fact, they date back 20 years. Our products themselves are very complex. Lots of components go into making up a system or a solution for a customer. And most of the quotes that have been sent out to our customers have full of errors. So missing components, inconsistent pricing for customers around the country. And it's been really hard to control discounting levels that our sales guys are proposing to customers as well. The sales team themselves have all been using different quote templates. So they'll use Word, but they'll have their own quote formatting, which is not consistent for customers. And, often we'll find them using old price lists. So their list pricing is out of date. So obviously it means we get lower margin on items that have been sold. We've also got, because our processes are quite old, there's quite a number of manual steps from the time of producing the quote to entering the final order that gets shipped to the customers. In fact, there's about 3 or 4 steps in that process that are quite manual and laborious. So our goal, I think the start of last year was to try and automate the process from producing a quote through to entering, producing the quote through our existing Microsoft Dynamics CRM. So we have Dynamics 365 CRM, and we wanted a variant configurator to ensure all the quotations themselves were accurate while trying to control the discounting and set discount levels that were being offered to customers themselves. We also wanted to obviously remove all these manual steps that were from the point of quoting to the point of shipping our instruments to our customers. And, you know, like all companies, we wanted to improve the customer experience. So, you know, we wanted to make sure we were providing consistent quotes to our customers that were accurate and professional proposals to our customers.
Sounds like the reality of most companies versus the management consultant's perspective, James. Once you get into the reality and have a look at a little bit of the laundry, it's like, yes.
Probably heard this 100 times, James.
Real business is complex. There's no doubt about it, and compromises get made.
Yeah, and it's always a challenge when a company's growing at the same time. So having enough people on the ground to actually implement some of these changes into a company as well. So obviously we decided to go with the Syncom CPQ. There was a number of reasons for that, but it's a great benefit for it, the fact that it did integrate with our Dynamics 365 CRM seamlessly, which was fantastic. And they had a pretty good understanding of how Microsoft Dynamics actually worked. It's been really successful in solving these problems. The product's extremely flexible, which is going to be great for us because we've got an ever-changing product range, and we need to be flexible in how this product actually works to help us with pricing for our customers themselves. Combining the Syncom CPQ with Dynamics 365 has eliminated a number of steps in that whole process. So a process from taking an order now to actually shipping a system is all automated. It's just by clicking a number of buttons through the process, and we can have things shipped out to our customers, which is fantastic. And it's reduced a lot of labour-intensive time and costs that we actually had within the organisation. The actual quotes that we're sending to the customers now are accurate, which means we're not losing profit on every sale or just about every order by giving away components free at the time of installation, which is not only frustrating to our service staff when they're installing systems, but also frustrating to the customers because they're often waiting for those extra components to come in. The management team's now very happy. We can control our pricing that is offered to the customers, and it's also helped us to improve our profitability. So our margins are much better now, which is making us very happy. Some of the key things that I've learned out of this process, and it's something that we try and do with our customers as well, is when you're considering a solution provider in this space, you really want someone that you can actually form a partnership with. And that's what we've found with Syncom is it is more of a partnership. There's a lot of leniency either way with what we do, and when they do work for us, they're not charging us all the time for everything they do, and we share information with them as well. So it's been a great relationship that we've formed with them. The products have to be flexible. We've like I said earlier, we've got new products coming every 6 months, and we have to be able to work with the software ourselves and be able to, develop new configurations that we have available for our sales guys continually. And, you know, finally, local support is really important. I've had experience in the past working with other CRM providers with variant configurators, and you know, often you can be waiting days and weeks to get information back on problems you're having. And with Syncom, we haven't had that problem, and it's been fantastic. You know, their response is within the hour generally when we have issues.
So Nigel, just maybe step back a little bit in terms of, you know, you explained well the challenges that you were facing and some of the issues that were going on in the business, and you know, I think everyone can relate to that. Going from that disarray into controlling and automating those processes, what were the top things that you learned, and where were the pain points that you needed to overcome to allow some level of automation? You know, you're wanting to press the button and have a sales proposal pump out that's customized, configured exactly what the client's looking for. Fantastic vision, but starting from where you were, that sounds like quite a leap. So where did you start on that journey, and what were the key things that you did that made that possible?
Yeah, look, you know, the biggest thing for us is I was constantly signing off on, you know, free hardware to customers, and you know, it was obviously costing us a lot of money. I think I calculated one year it was about $500,000 worth of free equipment we gave away. And, you know, like I was saying earlier, we're a growing organisation. So, you know, had this constant pain of everyone getting involved in getting equipment on site and installed and keeping customers happy. The biggest challenge for us wasn't actually, you know, Syncom were fantastic in getting things started and having weekly meetings on progress and that sort of thing, but it was having resources internally in Shimadzu to actually start to work on the program itself. And finally, I actually had to say to a staff member that they had to allocate all their time to get this package up and running, because it's just key. We couldn't keep losing this much money every year by, you know, poor quality quotations and missing components in quotes. So the biggest thing for us was resources, I would say, Hayden.
So was that a business analyst type of resource that looked at your price lists and I guess, you know, what are the configurations that are possible, you know, right back to, I guess there's an ERP system in your manufacturing in terms of ordering those solutions. You've got to have that exposed to your salespeople. You had to go through that from business analytical role, or was it a sales person, product management type of sort of?
A combination again. It was partially myself to be involved, and also our marketing manager. He has a very diverse knowledge of all our products. He understands the markets very well. So it was a combination of the two of us being involved in the whole process itself.
Yeah, I guess getting that senior management backing to throw resources at it and make them realise the importance. James, I'm sure you see that as a common thread with your guys as well. It's a recurring theme across IT and probably business, I guess, is getting focused on the right things.
Yeah, look, I'd absolutely echo that, and to the point of sometimes we don't walk away, but we'll delay projects until such time as the right resources are available, because often these things are hard and they do take time. Unless you've got focused energy applied to them with the right people available to support them, you're setting yourself up for a really hard journey. So what Nigel's saying really resonates with my experience.
Okay. Sorry, Nigel, not sure if that's we're cutting across your presentation, but we were pretty much through there. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, folks, as I say, keep reinforcing and don't be afraid to use the keyboard and bang some questions through. I kind of had some thoughts as we were going through, so I'll run those. And goes back probably, James, where we started talking about the digital transformation and providing in the B2B context that customer journey. It's a lot of it's talked in B2C, but in a B2B context, a lot of this seems to start with simplification, which doesn't necessarily. But is that right? Is that kind of start with simplifying your business, or at least picking off something that can be simplified as a test bed?
What we wanted to simplify is the decision-making process for the consumer, the customer at the end of the day. So what we want to do is actually take complexity, embrace it, and make it simple to navigate through the complexity for the sales team and the customer. We don't actually, in Nigel's example and Shimatsu's example, complexity is innate to their business model. And so it's about taking that complexity and harnessing it to be manageable. So it's not actually about simplifying the offer, it's about simplifying the decision-making process and supporting both the sales team and the consumer navigate through that.
So imagine, I guess, getting information in the right hands at the right time is fundamentally what it comes down to.
Yeah, look, it's not uncommon when you sit down with the best of the sales reps, they actually have a series of cheat sheets. It's quite normal to find the best of the sales team having their own cheat sheets that is their own process for this. The challenge is no one person knows everything, and then applying them in a very efficient way is very hard without tools and a lot of experience. So look, what something like, and Sidcom's a great example, what a tool like that can do is simplify the process to get the customer, to get the sales team from configure to pricing it up to getting it in quote format, the CPQ acronym, in a very efficient way.
Yeah. So Nigel, it's something you would agree with. That cheat sheet idea is quite a simple term that a lot of salespeople do have that. So you've allowed a tool that brings those cheat sheets together in one place and enjoying the benefits.
Exactly. And, to be honest, talking to our sales team, they're a lot happier now that they're using the variant configurator. It's made life so much simpler for them when they're preparing quotes. So, it's a great tool for them to have, and I'm glad we've implemented it.
So selling the benefits of some of this, consistency of information, best practice. This is what the top sales guys in the team are doing, so you should be doing it as well. It's getting them on board is a pretty key part of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Salespeople being salespeople.
If I can jump in there with another comment, Hayden, what all sales team will do is get the basics right, or fairly right. It's the variants that are very hard, or it's the incremental service, or it's the ongoing support modules and things like that. That's the stuff that tends to get missed and not done very well. So the core stuff is fine. It's all of that extra opportunity that's either not communicated properly, not made available properly, and certainly not priced in an effective way. So Nigel's comments about giving away $500,000 worth of hardware, that's a really common story. And for every dollar of hardware spent, there's probably another dollar of incremental service that's hiding behind that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we talked a little bit about this before, so maybe repeating, but I think it's certainly in terms of expectations that are in the marketplace from customers having experienced B2C, and I guess the Amazon effect of fantastic e-commerce systems. And I don't know, Nigel, you didn't really touch on it, but the extent to which you looked at what you were doing, with the next step perhaps being that you would put some of these processes up for self-fulfillment. Customers can go on, do the shopping basket, order their own products, and in a B2B context, that's a lot of that catch-up going on. Is that something that you're heading in that direction? And then James, maybe you can talk in more general sort of market terms of what you've seen in the B2B space with e-commerce.
Yeah, look, Hayden, I think for a company like Shimadzu, some of our smaller products, we could probably do something like that with. A lot of the more complex products requires a lot of consulting with customers before we actually do the configurations themselves. So we may at some stage get to the point for, items like balances and so on, that we could do something quite like you're saying, but again, our more complex products, I don't think we'll ever get to that point.
Yeah, it sounds like in your space, there's a major installation and implementation that you've got to get right, get it working, not necessarily consumables that fly in alongside it. Maybe there's a little bit of that.
Yeah, you could have 50 components that make up a system.
Yeah.
A lot of flexibility to how you configure those components as well.
Yeah. So James, what are you seeing in the e-commerce in the B2B space?
Look, I draw a distinction between having an online platform that's open to the public and having electronic communications with your customer base. The race to have an online platform, look, while important in some sectors, I think it has some downside risk that people have to be very careful of. Price transparency is an obvious one. You don't want to invite a race to the bottom in terms of price, because then you're not selling your whole value offer. And so if you're giving your customer one metric, which is price, to judge your product or your service, you're really selling yourself short. And it's not about ripping off the customer, but it's about making sure that you're communicating to the customer the value that you're offering them. And that online platform is fine in a completely commodity environment, but somewhere like Shimatsu, I'd counsel caution. However, digital interface with your client is a very different story. And so having back-end ways of interfacing with your client, if they're particularly in an environment of regular purchases, repeated purchases, that can be a very important way of both increasing efficiency, but also binding your customer to your ecosystem, or helping them come on board your ecosystem. So I guess I think it's pretty important that there's a distinction between the two. It's and this is kind of Silicon Valley thinking a little bit, where I spent a bunch of time, but it's a little bit kind of 2010, the race to have just an online platform. I think most complex businesses have kind of moved beyond that a little bit, or a fair bit, in the B2B world.
Look, I don't have a whole lot more. I think I got some other stuff here, but I think we've actually covered it off. Audience seems to be quite quiet today, so we'll leave them to digest what we've talked about, and I think we'll start to bring things to a close. We're nearly up to the top of the hour anyway. Now, so if I can just grab screen back, and where am I? Share my screen. One of these, probably one of those, not that one, that one. Catch up from where we're at to. Okay, so folks, thanks for joining today, and thanks to Nigel and James for your contribution. As you leave the session, there'll be a browser session pops up with a quick survey. Really appreciate if you could spend the time to fill that in and let us know. There is there's some options in there, but to let us know who you are, so we can follow up. Just give us your email address in there as well. It's this Zoom product is very good, but it doesn't integrate the survey with the actual webinar experience, so we're getting there on that front, and obviously some feedback in terms of the content today, and any ideas you have for how we might improve. So please give us your feedback. A quick word on Syncom, as you've heard, and Nigel broke all the rules in terms of being the salesman, but he's allowed to, because he's one of their customers, as opposed to Syncom themselves. So there's obviously a strong advocate there. They are, strong player in that CPQ, configure price quote, software providers. That they've been around for, I think, something like 40 years. The number popped up in my head. You might need to check out the website on that one. But the CPQ product is built and bolted into natively with the Microsoft Dynamics suite, including, as Nigel said, in the Dynamics 365. But it also standalone and integrates with other CRM solutions, and is available in the cloud or on premises. Most are these days. They operate locally through Sydney, so contact details on the screen there for the Sydney operation. So get in touch with them if there's things that have been touched on today that you're keen to see whether CPQ might be able to help you out. They also offer Syncom Control, which is an ERP solution for in the manufacturing space, and they've just recently picked up Priority ERP as a solution for small business that again is integrating with some of these CPQ solutions. So yeah, check them out, syncom.com.au, and we'll give them a buzz. They'll also be in touch with you directly after the event to make all of that easy. All right, so without further ado, I will bring things to a close. Thank you very much for your attendance today. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, James, for your contribution. Very interesting, and plenty of food for thought in there. I'll bring things to a close.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Cheers, guys.
Thank you.